Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad, 1899. A journey into the depths of man and the world.
Deep within the African continent, along the shadowed banks of the enigmatic Congo River, where darkness whispers to the soul and swallows all sound, begins the journey of an Englishman named Marlow in pursuit of a man called Kurtz. But what awaits him there is not merely a face, but a terrifying mirror held up to the human soul. Heart of Darkness, written by Joseph Conrad and first published in 1899, is one of the most thought-provoking and controversial works in the history of world literature. Its fame extends far beyond its surface narrative of European colonialism in Africa. It has become a profound philosophical allegory about identity, freedom, and the double standards of Western man. It is not merely a colonial tale, but a descent into the self, where logic disintegrates, the line between good and evil blurs, and a grim truth emerges.
The darkness is not in the jungle, but in the human heart.
Part 1. The Journey to the Other World. When the European mask melts in the heat of the jungle.
On a foggy evening on the banks of the Thames, Marlow, the contemplative English sailor, sat gazing at the vast grey waters where ships, which had once carried the British dream to the farthest corners of the earth, lay at anchor. The place was overflowing with the history of the empire, from where fleets of conquest had long ago set forth under the banner of freedom, extending the frontiers of civilization in the name of light, only to plant darkness in the hearts of peoples. Marlow, with his slender frame and weary eyes, was not merely a sailor, but a seeker of meaning, a pursuer of truth in the heart of the unknown world. When offered a job with the European trading company operating in the Congo, he accepted it not for the sake of profit, but out of an obscure impulse, an inner calling that urged him to cross frontiers, not just geographically, but existentially as well. And so his journey began, from a civilized river to a primal one, from London to the depths of Africa, from the light of civilization to the heart of darkness. At first, everything seemed clear.
Europe was extending its hand to the savage peoples, bestowing upon them order, language, and progress.
But little by little, with every mile that distanced Marlow from European shores, he felt this pure narrative collapsing. The deeper he ventured into the interior, the more it seemed that what Europe was doing was not spreading civilization, but plunder in the name of order, and enslavement in the name of freedom. He saw with his own eyes how the native inhabitants were driven like phantoms, dragging their emaciated bodies under the scorching sun, toiling not for their daily bread, but so that precious white ivory could be shipped to the halls of the wealthy in Paris and London. He saw the men of the European company dressed in elegant suits and wearing gentle faces, who were yet little different from pirates, hiding behind official reports and an eloquent moral tongue, while their hands planted thorns in the chests of others.
Freedom was a magic word, the Western man repeated, but it was a freedom that belonged only to him and applied only to his own kind.
Marlow was not an idealist, but he was honest with himself, and in a moment of deep contemplation, he remarked,
I felt as if I were traveling not to a center of trade, but into a corrupted human soul.
That was the key moment, when he understood that the journey was not to a place, but into the consciousness of Western man himself. The true journey was not to the jungle, but into the jungle that grows in the soul of colonialism, at the core of the identity of the man who speaks of morality while practicing violence without batting an eye. Here, the double standard is starkly revealed.
While the Europeans sanctify concepts of justice, they trample upon them when it concerns the other. And while they preach freedom, they turn a blind eye to the shackles they themselves have forged.
In the depths of these contradictions, Marlow's sense of guilt, astonishment, and alienation takes shape, for he sees the face of the white man beginning to crack. He sees, beneath the European skin, a primal pulse, not so different from the jungle he claims he came to tame.
We live in the light, but within each of us is a heart of darkness.
This painful admission comes not from weakness, but from an awakening. For freedom, when granted to a nation that looks down upon others, becomes a tool of control. An identity, when built on the illusion of superiority, becomes a fragile mask that cannot withstand the jungle. And so Marlow begins to realize that his journey is not just a search for Kurtz, but for himself, for his own place amidst all these lies that have been woven over centuries.
Is he a witness to the truth, or a participant in the creation of the illusion? Will he return as he left? Or has the darkness whose roots he saw there begun to grow within him as well?
Part 2. The falling of the mask. When the false light dissipates.
Every step Marlow took toward the upper Congo River was like the peeling away of a new layer of falsehood. Little by little, Marlow saw not only the savagery of the jungle, but the other face of European civilization, a face that does not smile, but devours. As he neared Kurtz's station, the images blurred before him. He could no longer distinguish between the barbarian and the civilized. Rather, it seemed to him that everything he had learned in Europe about order, reason, and superiority was nothing but children's tales, myths repeated by colonizers to justify their own brutal behavior. The jungle itself, despite its dense shadows and oppressive silence, seemed more honest to him than the men who wore pristine clothes and the masks of civilization. At the station, Marlow met the company men, flabby bureaucrats like statues sculpted from vanity and ignorance. They spoke of a civilizing mission, yet they were incapable of managing their own affairs, let alone saving a human soul. They cloaked their violence in words.
We are civilizing them. We are teaching them order.
While their hands were stained with the blood of innocence, and their souls saturated with the desire for control. Then came the strange encounter with the Russian agent, a thin young man in a colorful cap, smiling like a lost child who had found his father in the jungle. He was a devoted follower of Kurtz, a believer in him as priests believe in their gods. Marlow could not believe his eyes.
How could a European man abandon his self, his values, his reason, to submit to the authority of a single man, merely because he possessed charisma and power?
This moment was a mirror. In it, Marlow saw a Western man's worship of the individual's strength, not his justice, of his loud voice, not his logic.
When man is granted complete freedom without accountability or morality, it transforms from a liberating force into another tool of oppression.
Kurtz was not a monster when he came to Africa. He was a man with ideas, ambition, and perhaps a philosophical inclination. But at some point, he slipped. Severed from Europe, from oversight, from law, he became absolutely free. And instead of ascending, he descended.
When Kurtz was given absolute freedom, he became a slave to his own inner desires.
The mask had fallen. The Westerner who claimed moral purity was revealed to be wearing a fragile mask, concealing a man no less savage than those he professed to save. He plundered not to rescue, but to satisfy his greed. And he killed not out of necessity, but from a pathological impulse of superiority, ingrained in his being through centuries of colonizing lands and peoples. Marlow saw this with terrifying clarity, and he began to wonder, was the freedom heralded by the West, since the time of Plato and Rousseau, merely a myth? Was reason, that sacred god in the books of the Enlightenment, just a new tool for domination? And did the European identity, so boastful of its science, art, and thought, hide within itself a primal shadow darker than the jungle itself?
The jungle does not deceive you. It shows you the chaos of nature. But Europe, my friend, hides that chaos beneath a pristine shirt, elegant laws, and resounding speeches on virtue.
In the heart of the jungle, amid the smell of dampness, blood, and ivory, Marlow realized the issue was not civilization versus barbarism, but a form of skillfully camouflaged barbarism, practiced by the civilized with the confidence of the victor. And so, his question shifted from, who is Kurtz, to a deeper, more dangerous one.
Who is Western man when all his adornments fall away? Who is he when nothing remains of identity but instinct, and of freedom but plunder?
Part 3. Kurtz, the unforgiving mirror.
After a long journey down the river, where the jungle absorbed light, sound, and memory, Marlow reaches the point of no return. Or perhaps the beginning of his descent into truth. There, in the heart of the wilderness, where no law exists but survival, and no sound but the distant whispers of drums, Marlow finds Kurtz, that name with which everything began. But what he found was not the man he had imagined, but a walking phantom, a skeletal frame of naked power, veiled by nothing but megalomania. Kurtz was more than just a character. He was a self-fulfilling prophecy, a genius poisoned by unbridled freedom. Given absolute authority, he established his own civilization.
A kingdom without conscience, where humans were sacrificed and heads were displayed on spears as tokens of triumph.
Kurtz did not collapse in the jungle, he dissolved into it, assimilated with it, until he became the jungle itself. He needed no one to condemn him, for he had executed within himself every judge, every deterrent, every vestige of collective conscience. In that isolation, where there was no observer but the self, freedom shed the cloak of values, tearing itself away from its principles, to reveal its naked truth.
A beast hidden in the heart, waiting to be unleashed.
Kurtz was not merely a criminal, but a thinker deceived by the idea of superiority, transforming it into a justification for blood. He did not lack intelligence. Perhaps his intelligence was his greatest betrayal. For he did not commit evil out of ignorance, but rather committed evil, convinced he was doing good. He believed what he was doing was a civilizing mission, while he was building his throne upon the bones of the innocent. In the end, as the moment of death approached him, Kurtz did not invoke Europe, nor his beloved, nor memories of poetry and light. He did not speak of his achievements, nor of his dreams. Instead, he uttered only two words, falling from his mouth like bullets of truth.
The horror! The horror!
This was not the cry of one who fears the end, but of one who suddenly realized that he himself was the end. Kurtz looked into the mirror of the self, without pretense, without masks, and saw the beast he called civilization and found it staring back at him from within. That simple confession was enough to destroy every narrative the West tells about itself. Marlow carried Kurtz to the ship, then to the grave, but the truth was not buried with him. It became a heavy burden, an unforgettable memory, a question without an answer. When he returned to Europe, he was not the same. He was no longer the man who believed in the European myth of progress and light. He had seen with his own eyes that what Europe called civilization was nothing but savagery covered in silk, and that Kurtz, in all his brutality, was not an aberration from the West, but a concentration of it, a pure image without adornment. And when Marlow met Kurtz's fiancée, that woman who still saw him as a missionary saint, he could not bring himself to shatter her dream. He did not tell her the truth. He did not speak to her of spears and heads and blood. Instead, he lied. He told her that Kurtz's last words were her name. Why did he lie?
Because the truth was unbearable? Because civilization as he knew it was built on noble lies? Or because he realized, deep down, that lying was the last shield protecting Western man from seeing himself as he truly is?
Europe gave birth to Kurtz, then denied him. Not because it did not know him, but because it saw in him the mirror and recoiled in terror from the reflection. Marlow returned from his journey, but he never left the heart of darkness. For that darkness was not there in the jungle, but had always been here, in the human heart, at the core of identity, at the essence of freedom when it loses consciousness.
Conclusion. Who lives in the darkness?
The novel Heart of Darkness is not about Africa, but about the depths of the human soul. Filter is about the false freedom promoted by imperial powers. Allred is about the Western man who claims moral superiority while being steeped in hypocrisy. Allred is about the beast that lives inside man, waiting only for the restraints to be lifted to emerge.
The heart of darkness is us, when we are granted power without accountability, freedom without consciousness, and glory without responsibility.
Kindly, if you like our work, support us with a like, encouragement, comment, or share so that the benefit may spread.